And it's lights out.
Welcome back to another episode of Drive Through Penalty. I'm Sean. I'm here with my father, CD. We're going to be talking about last week's race in Canada. We're going to be talking about this week's race in Austria. We're going to be talking about some F1 fantasy strategy. And as always, some good old F1 history with CD.
Okay, Sean, I think before we go to Austria, we should talk about what happened in Canada, because this week was not boring and there's a couple new twists that we haven't had happen in the past. So what did you think of the race?
I like the race, but I love the drama that came out of the race. Obviously, Lando Norris is the talk this week. He made a move similar to what we've seen Max do in the past, and I think we saw a different side of Lando this week.
I don't think we saw a different side of Lando. I think what we saw from Lando was that other side that has been getting increasingly, more agitated over the fact that he's got a teammate that he can't keep up to. And so he did a bit of a Max, but it wasn't as an intentional mess. I think it was more just out of frustration. He was trying to get by, and he made a bad move. He apologized to the world for it, including his teammates. And I think he got a good scolding this week in closed doors.
He certainly did. And, his pace looked good. At one point, I thought he was going to catch Oscar, but he was getting a little too gutsy there at the end, thinking, he could pass Oscar on the grass on the side.
Nobody can pass.
Nobody can pass. And I don't know if you saw what's been trending this week, but Nico Rosberg might have been at fault for that. So the trend is every time Nico Rosberg takes a photo of himself before the race, something terrible either happens to the driver, to the car, or something along those lines. And this week, Nico Rosberg took a picture of himself. It was a selfie, but he was standing at that part of the track doing, the classic. And even there were some tweets out there saying something bad is about to happen here. And we didn't know what it was. It happened. The last thing I am going to mention about this, though, is should Lando have been penalized a little bit more than he was? If Max were to have done something like this, he would have received penalty points.
If Max had done it to Tsunoda, nothing would have happened. So I think doing it to your own teammate is enough of a problem as it is. And as far as the Rosberg, I like him the same way I liked the way Villeneuve interviews. He's not afraid of little controversy.
But let's get into the positives. George Russell, Mercedes on the podium. Kimi Antonelli, his first podium in F1. God, I was happy to see that.
That part's fun. I like that too. And if you recall, I thought Russell was going to have a comeback week. But what I'm shocked at was that McLaren was as slow as they were. And I heard something might have something to do with the tire arrangement.
For sure. And if you stick around at the end of the video and you're an F1 fantasy player, we're going to really dive deep into picks this week. There are absolute must pickups, definite must drops. And the question amongst the community right now is, do we drop McLaren? Not because McLaren has completely fallen off, but they reserve such a big part of our budget that we could potentially go to the 2-2 build, which I'll explain later, which means 2 premium constructors, 2 premium drivers, which ultimately wins leagues and will get you into the top 10K. So dropping McLaren potentially frees up enough money to have the Mercedes-Ferrari combo, maybe even put Antonelli and a Piastri in there. But
that's a great conversation, and definitely, folks, stick around for it if you're a fantasy player, because this is one of those weeks, my son tells me, that you can make some big headway.
Absolutely. And before we jump into the Austrian Grand Prix, I just want to say, if you like these videos, please subscribe. We're a new channel. We love doing this, but it would really help support us. And we love seeing our numbers grow. But stick around. We have lots to talk about this week. And let's jump into the Austrian Grand Prix. So this weekend, we are in Max Verstappen territory. We're at the Red Bull Ring in Austria. 4.3 kilometers long, 71 laps, 3 DRS zones. It's got everything.
Aren't we in Yuki Tsunoda territory too?
Technically, yes, we are. We have one of the shortest circuits of the year, aside from Monaco. And we have all this action packed into this 4.3 little kilometer long track. Tons of room for error. The sausage curbs are absolutely deadly. If you don't hit that apex perfectly, hit those braking points perfectly, you're in big trouble. But if you get them right, tons of room for overtaking, those long straights. You know, I think we're going to see a lot of passing, a little more action. I think the elevation actually has a little bit of an impact here on the car's performance. So, you know, we know certain cars perform better in cooler temperatures, like let's say Mercedes.
Yeah.
So, you know, keep an eye out for them, especially since we are looking at, you know, maybe them taking the constructor spot away from McLaren in the next couple weeks. I don't know how it's going to play a role this week, but I certainly think Mercedes is going to be up there again. Keep an eye out for George Russell. Ferrari, I'd love to say, you know, I'm confident in them again this week, but I have a tough time saying that I am. I think Max Verstappen is going to do what he does every single week. He is going to probably, well, you know, we'll save it for later, but I think we're going to see him on pole position again. And we're also in Yuki Tsunoda territory, but I don't think it's going to be the same story for him.
You know me and the home race thing, and, you know, that brings me back to, I think Max will do okay. Because I think they test on this track and practice on this track, so he knows his way around there. But I'm not ready to write off McLaren yet. And P3, if McLaren doesn't seem to be in the top 5, you know, that might be a good time to make a temporary move down to another team and upgrade your driver kind of thing. But I'm not ready for that yet. I don't know what went wrong in Canada. But I find it hard to believe we're changing the guard yet.
I'm still extremely confident in Piastri's ability to secure pole positions and win races because I think he's the better driver this year. I'm not denying that Lando Norris isn't a fantastic driver, but Austria's just got it together. And Lando sees that happening.
Cold.
He's ice cold, and Lando sees it, and you can see the frustration, like we're saying, building up inside of him. And then you have a guy like Max Verstappen who's still playing a role in, you know, in the back of his head every single time. So he's got it all happening right now. I think Oscar Piastri has just got it figured out. And another guy, George Russell, like the guy is just on point this year. And who knows, we could see him on pole again.
Well, he certainly enjoyed beating Max to the grid and then beating Max to the finish line. And kudos to him.
And if he had his way, he would have had Max penalized again and disqualified from the next race because I'm sure you saw him breaking under the safety car, trying to catch Max, slipping in front of him. He called out to the radio right away saying, hey, Max, you know, pass under safety car conditions. Anyways, I think Mercedes is going to do really well this week. And I don't know if you want to chat about Ferrari, but...
If you recall a week ago, at the last race when we did our podcast, I mentioned that I come across some information that Ferrari was upgrading their chassis big time, and to the point where it made substantial difference. But I haven't read anything since that has substantiated that was going to happen this weekend. I think it was more like Silverstone, so maybe the next one. Listen, I don't think there's a clear-cut favorite this weekend. You know, we're just going on gut feeling. You know, after what we saw last week, everybody is in it.
And historically, this is a track for deleted lap times because of the fine margins. If you make a mistake on turn 1, turn 9, same thing. You know, you've deleted your lap time, and that could essentially knock you out of one of the qualies. So
how is turn 1? Maybe this is a great time for you to get in your car and show us.
It's a tricky one, but I'll show you in just a sec. So if you guys are ready, I'll hop in the rig and take you for a ride. All right, we're here in Austria. Open DRS to start the lap. Fine, just braking after that 100-meter board. Using the curbs there. DRS open again. Taking the straightest line possible here. Running all the way uphill, staying to the left side. Braking hard at that 100-meter board. All the way down to first gear. Open that DRS up again. Passing the chalet here on the left. Approaching what I think is the hardest corner on the track. Avoiding that gravel trap. Arcing that corner. Up to sixth gear here. Looking at the 50-meter board. Down to fifth gear, quick corner. Using the entire track down to sixth gear. I have to run wide. That corner is deadly. Approaching turns 9 and 10 here. Braking at the 50-meter board, trying to keep these two corners tight. Running over that curb, opening that DRS up again for this final straight. And that's a lap in Austria.
Thanks for the lap, Sean. I hope you enjoyed that. We seem to do very well on social media when you do your laps, and it's very informative, as I've said before. But one thing I took from your lap, it seems to me you might be even a little quicker than Colapinto.
I might have been. We'll have to check the lap times. But speaking of Colapinto, he is now on his 5th race of the 5-race contract at Alpine. And does that mean if he doesn't perform well, Jack Doohan's back in? I'm not sure. We haven't heard too much about that, but you know, pressure's on for him as well. There seems to be a lot of pressure on these young drivers every single week. Speaking of pressure on another young driver, I think this could be one of Yuki Tsunoda's last races at Red Bull. Do you see the swap to Isaac Hadjar? And Hadjar was asked this week if he's ready to move up to Red Bull Racing, and you could tell he was a little hesitant in his response and said, you know, sure, I'm ready, but...
Well, he's trying to be a nice guy too.
But if you were him, would you want to switch to Red Bull?
So I've had the same opinion for a couple of months now. I think that second Red Bull car, I don't even think you could drive. It's a difficult ride for guys that aren't prepared. And Max is never... You can't put him in the same category as any of these rookies. So I think that Hadjar would welcome the opportunity, but I think he should be nervous because he's doing really well at RB. And I'm not sure he would do as well in the Red Bull as RB. And who knows what's going to happen next year. Something big's going to happen there. They're going to go after some big name driver. They're not going to have who knows who and ride in second.
Absolutely. So good luck to Yuki Tsunoda, especially if you're a Yuki Tsunoda fan. Good luck to Colapinto if you're a Colapinto fan or you're Argentinian, because there's a lot on the line for these guys. And that goes for the rest of the rookies. You know, nothing is secure in Formula One. There's a new team opening up next year, as we know, Cadillac. There's 2 new seats available. We might see Perez back in there. We might see Ricciardo back in there. We might see Valtteri Bottas in there. Who knows? But it's going to be an exciting second half of the year. And as we do every week, I think this is a great time to jump into our favorite segment, which is History with CD.
I'm gonna talk about the Austrian Grand Prix and the history of the Grand Prix because it's quite unique and it's got a couple of twists and turns in there. And the first race they had there was at an airport they converted into a track, and it was in 1963, and Jack Brabham won. But it wasn't a sanctioned event. So the first race official for Formula One in Austria was in 1964, and Lorenzo Bandini won in a Ferrari. But the best part of that race was that it was successful, but there was an issue. The track was too dangerous. It was narrow, especially in pit row. It was bumpy. It was bad for spectators. So F1 decided to pull out after just the one race until they found a better facility. So in 1970, they moved locations, and this one was built in the mountains, and it was a very, very fast track. In 1970, Ferrari won. 1971, BRM won. And that year, 72, Jackie Stewart won the race and won his second championship there. In 1975, there was a heavy downpour through the whole race. It started like an hour and a half late, and they had some. It was the fatal accident of Mark Donohue, and boy, I remember Mark Donohue. He raced everything, Can-Am. He was sensational, and the guy that went on to win crashed right after the start and finish line. 1976, the home favorite Niki Lauda missed the race because of that horrendous happening in Nürburgring. And the winner of that race was John Watson in a Penske Formula One car, and that was the only time Penske ever won. They didn't stay in Formula One racing for very long. From 1977 to 1983, there was multiple winners. Rarely was it the same car 2 years in a row. It was kind of sporadic as far as who won. And in 1976, Niki Lauda won. So he finally won at home. That's after his comeback. And in 1984, Niki Lauda won his home race. And that was despite, everything he had to overcome to get back in a car. In 1987, they had to restart the race 2 times, like 2 extra times. And because the pit lane, the grid was so tight and narrow, it was just a mess, and it became an ongoing issue on this track. At the end of the race, it was again deemed way too dangerous. Why was it dangerous? It was that narrow straightaway out of the grid. It was also the trees. There was no protection from the trees, and I don't know if you've ever seen anything hit a tree. The tree doesn't move a lot, and it was very dangerous. The corners were very high speed, and the next time they raced there, they had to start altering the track. It was too fast. And because it had so many issues, they shut it down and they backed out of it. And Formula One had left Austria again, this time for a decade. 95 and 96, this racetrack was refurbished, and they ran there for a few years. And I think the last year they were there, it was kind of famous for what Ferrari pulled. As Ferrari asked Rubens Barrichello to move over and let Michael Schumacher through, and that really upset a lot of people. In July 2013, the parent company of Red Bull Racing, Red Bull, the beverage, they bought the racetrack, and that was in 2013, and they immediately got into meetings with Bernie Ecclestone. And in 2014, Bernie Ecclestone had it on the calendar. And it usually doesn't happen that quick, but there you go. When you got the cash, you can move things a little quicker. So in 2014, the Austrian Grand Prix was back on the calendar, and it's been run for 11 years consecutively so far. And Mercedes has won 6 times, Red Bull has won 4 times, and Ferrari has won the other one. And I guess it just goes to show that having a home track is a bit of a recipe for winning.
There's some good Austrian history for you. Thank you, CD, again for your segment this week. We love it.
So I think now is a good time for us to skip into the F1 fantasy. This is where, for you fantasy players, this is important you watch this, because it's not just Sean giving his beliefs. He uses a tool in there that gives reasons for why he does this. So whether you're on tap with what Sean does with his team or not, at least this will show you why he does what he does, and you can take from that information what you want to do.
And if you followed us from the first episode, you'll know that I had a horrible first week in fantasy Formula One, but so did a lot of the other players. And this season has been about turning that around. And we've managed to go from 25th place in our pool to 8th, and we've done that all through a strategic method. We're building budget. We're also looking at points, and I'm going to share that with you guys right now. So stick around.
Oh, and one last short note. I've either been first or second every week.
Let's go. Welcome back to the F1 fantasy segment of this video. We're going to jump right back into it. We are going to be talking about our team builds moving into Austria. So this is one of the most exciting F1 fantasy weeks because there is so much to choose from this week, and you actually are going to see a ton of different builds. There's new meta builds popping up, and I'm going to show you exactly what those look like right now. I'm sitting at about 110.5 million total team budget, which is pretty good. I'd like to be higher at this point of the year, but we're doing pretty good considering we got off to such a horrendous start. But yeah, you're gonna see a ton of different builds, and primarily, we've talked about it last week, we are moving towards that 2-2 build, and it's gonna unlock for a lot of teams in the next 2 to 3 weekends, at least coming out of the summer break. I think you're gonna see a lot of those 2-2 builds, and that's when these teams are gonna pull away. So again, we are working towards achieving that, and it's probably gonna take 2 to 3 more weeks. The only way we're gonna get there is if we can make some more money. So we are still climbing the ranks in our pool, and ultimately we want one of those podium spots, but I'm not even worried about it right now, because I know if I can get there before the guys ahead of me, then I'm gonna catch up really quickly, and with half a season left, could actually bring me up to the podium quite easily. So let's just look at our team here. McLaren, Ferrari are our two premium constructors, and Piastri is our premium driver. And I'm still very happy that I've had him in my spot the entire season. I haven't made any changes. Guys have moved to Lando Norris. They're going to be wanting to move right back to Oscar Piastri or look at a couple other options. So the big debate this weekend is it Ferrari or Mercedes? Some people are even saying, is it Ferrari and Mercedes and not McLaren? But I think this week, ultimately, it's going to come down to Ferrari and Mercedes builds. Who do you take? So, as we know, Ferrari takes up a huge reserve here at $29.1 million. And we could save, $5 million by switching to Mercedes, which allows us to pick a much better premium driver or secondary driver. And it actually unlocks a really cool build for me this week. And I've kind of been testing it out a little bit, and I'll show you what that looks like right now. So if we put Mercedes in there, like I said, we have $6.2 million, but we also have Isaac Hadjar, who's reserving almost $7 million, and that would free up quite a bit. We have 3 moves this week without being penalized. $12.9 million in the bank. Oscar Piastri coming at 25.2. I'm just going to kind of tease the idea of what it would look like to drop him and kind of see what this would free up for me. And that's a lot of money. That's $38.1 million with 2 really good constructors and the opportunity to get potentially a premium driver and another second one. So if we look at guys like, the guy that won last week's race, George Russell, who's only $22 million. If you go over to the budget builder section of the F1 Fantasy Tools website, you'll see that this guy only needs 12 points this weekend to increase by the maximum $0.3 million. And I love Russell this year. CD's been talking about him the entire year and how consistent he's been. So I think that might actually be a really good pickup. Now, is he going to beat Piastri this week? I don't know. That's the question. So, we're looking at Piastri here, and he's going to need 24 points to increase by that 0.3 million. So if Russell's on his game and actually fighting, and McLaren's not really all, that they look out to be this weekend, that might be a really good swap. So back over to F1 Fantasy. Let's do it. Let's say we put George Russell in here. We still have $16.1 million. And we are getting a lot closer to Kimi Antonelli. So we are not quite there yet, but if we did the drop from McLaren and we put Ferrari back in there, we would have enough money. So this is kind of a build I've been looking at. I've been thinking about this week, and that's my 2-2 right there. 2 premiums drivers, 2 premium constructors, and that's pretty nice looking lineup. The only thing is, if McLaren still looks good for the rest of the season, and we are just now bleeding points by having Ferrari in there, and Ferrari does what Ferrari does, and disqualifies himself in a race, or they just don't have good weekends, I'm going to be now losing points. But you're kind of making it up having that second premium driver. Regardless, it's an option. I am thinking about it. Is this a differentiator team? I think so. I don't think too many people are going to have a team like this weekend. So really something to consider. We're going to quickly reset that. I'm going to show you a couple other things real quick before we head off today. Back over to our team here. Let's say we don't want to do such a drastic team swap. We do have 3 moves, 3 free transfers. We're going to head over to Budget Builder. And like I said, my priority this weekend is building budget so I can have an even better 2-2 potentially later down in the season. And this weekend is so great because there are so many drivers that can do that for you, and it's wide open. So having a look over here, we have Alonso. We picked him up a couple weeks ago, probably a week too early, but that's okay. He started actually picking up some points. Hulkenberg's an absolute must-have on your team right now. If you don't have that Hulkenberg-Alonso combo, I really think you're missing out. Just because they can basically DNF and still give you that 0.6 million increase. That's huge. As long as they survive, they're going to definitely get you that money. Then there's a couple other guys you want to look at this week, and Pierre Gasly is on it for, I think, the first time this year, which is pretty awesome. And he's kind of flipped positions with Isaac Hadjar because he didn't have such a great weekend. And Bortoleto finally is kind of at the top of this tier B price budget leaderboard, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know if 8 points is even something he can achieve in that kick. So, you know, something to consider. But Hulkenberg, Alonso for sure. Gasly is a probably for me, or unless we just keep Hajar and Colapinto again. Sainz finally up on the board. But I really like those guys at the top 5 there. So I don't think I want Colapinto on my team anymore because he's just either gone up by 0.2 or kind of stayed the same. And Isaac Hajar, I might be willing to take the gamble with him this week. So if I drop him, that frees up, I believe, you know, Carlos Sainz or Pierre Gasly. But again, we're going for that budget. And he's 0.6 million cheaper than he was last week. So it's kind of a good pickup for me. That's 2.7 million. I want Hulkenberg, and I don't really care to have Liam Lawson on my team. So if I drop him, we head on over here and we pick up Nico Hulkenberg. I like that, you know. Is there anybody we could get for dropping Colapinto? I don't think so. Yeah, Bortoletto, but that's not worth it for me. So this is probably the team that I'm going to be running with this week, and I'm fairly happy with it. I might make a last-minute switch from Ferrari, let's say, to Mercedes, and it might look something like this, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. Use the F1 fantasy tools to your advantage. Plug in your team, see what it calculates, see what the predictions are, play around with the builds. If budget's important to you, which I think it should be, use the budget builder section of the app. It's amazing. And yeah, I look forward. Please send me your builds. It's going to be super exciting. Good luck to y'all. And let's get back into the video.
Thanks for the information you shared with us about the F1 pool.
You're very welcome. And thanks to all of you guys for tuning in again this week. We really appreciate it. Again, if you could like and subscribe, it'd mean a lot to us. But we've landed.
So I think we're off for some schnitzel and some beer, and enjoy the race, folks.